Hey guys, Leslie here, and today I want to talk to you about the release of my new gray hair detective quiz. So, lots of you have written to me personally to get my opinion on what you can do to reverse your gray hair. And because so many of you have asked me this question, and I unfortunately no longer have the time to reply to each and every one of you, I really wanted to come up with a way that you would be able to get these answers yourself. So as you know, I don't believe that there's only one cause of gray hair. I believe it's a multifactorial system problem inside the body that causes gray hair, and it manifests on the outside. But how do you figure out what is actually causing that gray hair? Well, it's a little bit like that old game. I don't know if you played this when you were younger, but how many of you know this? I think in the United States it might be called Cluedo, but here in the UK it's called Clue. And you might have noticed that I'm wearing my Miss Scarlet outfit today. So it's because you have got to think about this game and how you would play it when you're trying to figure out what is causing your gray hair. So in the same way that you get this sort of checklist of, what are the possible causes? Who are the suspects? Where is this happening? What is the weapon? You really do need to do pretty much the same thing with your gray hair. So, a lot of people say, oh, should I take B vitamins? Should I have molasses because it's got iron and trace minerals in it to reverse my gray hair? We don't know. We just know that those are possible things you could do. But in order to determine which of those things would work for you, or maybe all of them would work for you, we really need to drill down to the root cause of your gray hair. So that really means looking at all the suspects and figuring that out. So if you go through my gray hair detective quiz, you'll be asked various questions. So for instance, are you a woman? If you're a woman, are you still having a monthly bleed? Why is that important? Well, because women who lose blood every month are also losing a lot of iron. And if you don't have enough iron, you're going to lose pigment from your hair. So that's a very important clue there. And you might be able to top up, and I've got Miss Scarlet there, you might be able to top up with iron. On the other hand, other questions we'll ask are you under a lot of stress? Now, if you're under a lot of stress, then it could well be that your levels of a master antioxidant known as glutathione are really depleted. Or for instance, have you had an infection recently? If you've had an infection recently, your glutathione will also have been depleted. So in that case, we might take Mr. Green here and consider taking glutathione. If you're stressed though, another thing that happens is your B complex vitamins decline. That's everything from vitamin B1, benfotiamine, to B5 pantothenic acid, to B7 biotin, B6, B9, and B12. And so, we might then try and get you to look at whether or not your B12 levels are low. And if they are, to top up with Professor Plum here. Now, what about how your mood is? The quiz will ask you, how are you actually feeling? Do you feel a bit depressed, a little bit more glum than usual? Think back to how you were when you felt at your absolute best. Compared to then, how do you feel now? And I know that this isn't something, when we go to the doctor, we can't really show up and say, hey, I just don't feel good like I used to, because it's sort of not specific enough. But we ourselves can sort of do some detective work. If we actually feel a bit more down, a bit more blue than usual, or than we did before, we can then try and trace back, what are the causes? Have I been under a lot of stress? Have I suffered any kind of trauma? And when I say trauma, I don't necessarily mean emotional trauma. I also mean physical trauma. Are you pulling a lot of all-nighters? Have you been working out a lot? By that I mean, are you working out sort of an hour every single day lifting heavy weights? Well, that does have an impact on your thyroid, and you might actually need to get some thyroid hormones. And there are some other supplements that would help with that. Selenium is really necessary for thyroid hormones, but there are a lot of other things that you'll need, like iodine and tyrosine. So as you can see, this is actually pretty complex, and that's why I like to think of this as something for which you really need to do a lot of detective work. And the great news is you've got more of these clues in some ways than your doctor. And why do I say that? Well, it's because you are with yourself 24/7. So you're in a position to notice if you've got poor sleep, if your anxiety levels are up, if you are anxious and your mood is very low, well, then you really do need to look at your vitamin B12 because that has a huge impact on your mood. Now, what about, we've mentioned quite a few things, and also B vitamins, and I've got the Butler here. But what about something that isn't your usual suspect? So by that I mean it's not a missing vitamin, it's not a missing mineral or missing antioxidant, it's not a hormone deficiency or imbalance like thyroid. What if it's something totally unexpected? By this, I mean an infection. Yes, you can actually get gray hair from simply having had an infection. Now, it could be everything from, say, strep to typhoid fever. It could be something like H. pylori, which is the bacteria that causes both an ulcer and is also involved in stomach cancer. It could even be Candida albicans. So how do these infections cause gray hair? Well, let's start with the first two, say typhoid or strep, mono. One of these types of infections, any kind of infection is going to provoke the body to release hydrogen peroxide. That's because hydrogen peroxide, if you've ever seen that, if you've ever gone to the nurse's office at school, or as a parent, you've ever used this on your child, hydrogen peroxide on a cut will actually disinfect an area. Now, our bodies can make this. And when it makes this hydrogen peroxide to kill off an infection, of course, it's still in our body and we need to get rid of it. That will actually deplete our glutathione. And that is in our liver. And if we don't have enough glutathione, say we've used this to knock out this, then we don't have any left over to actually deal with hydrogen peroxide that might be caused just by stress, by everyday stress. And that then means that excess hydrogen peroxide comes up out of our hair and turns into gray hair, right? We're bleaching it from the inside out. Now, in the case of H. pylori and Candida albicans, it's a different mechanism of action. So they're both infections, but, well, one is a bacterial infection, the other is a fungal infection. However, what happens there is that they reduce our gut's ability to absorb nutrients. In particular, with H. pylori, it actually eats, believe it or not, this guy eats iron. It lives off of iron. So the H. pylori bacteria will actually burrow into the lining of your gut wall. It will create a little biofilm around itself, which is slightly gross, but that biofilm will protect it from other things that you might put into your gut to try and kill it. And while it is burrowed into the lining of the gut, what does it do? It pulls iron out of your blood. And that could be a reason why you don't have enough iron for your hair pigment. But at the same time, H. pylori will compromise the lining of your gut wall. And it makes it very hard for your gut to absorb nutrients, for example, like vitamin B12, very much in particular with H. pylori. Candida albicans, which is a fungal infection, does something different. It just makes it difficult for those nutrients to be absorbed across the board. So I hope that this gives you an idea about the problem and how you really do need to have a bit of a checklist of who the suspects are and how they are working inside your body, not just to give you gray hair, but probably do other things that aren't so good for your health. And that gray hair detective should offer you some clues. I know lots of you who are in lockdown are not in a position to go get blood tests. That's always my preference, that you work with a healthcare professional to get blood tests so you can really figure out, hone in on those suspects and really determine which one or two are worth pursuing. Where are those deficiencies, those imbalances, those infections? Address those first, right? Because you get more of a return on the efforts you make if you go really targeted. Otherwise, you might be taking iron when your problem is actually lack of glutathione, right? That doesn't make much sense. And this stuff is super expensive. So it does make sense to really think about this. But what I'm hoping with the gray hair detective is that for those of you who are in lockdown, you'll be able to take that test and you'll get some idea. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it's definitive. I'm not a medical professional. This is not a diagnostic tool, but it's there to give you some sense of where the problem could be. You can raise it with your doctor, but you could also get an at-home testing kit. And those at-home testing kits, for example, will allow you to check your B vitamin levels, in particular, your vitamins B6, B9, B12, and would also allow you to check your ferritin levels. That is the storage chamber for iron. And that would be at least a start. And then you can start crossing off the suspects. If you notice that those are fine, you can cross those off. Same goes for thyroid as well. So I really am looking forward to you guys interacting with that gray hair detective. And if you've got any questions or comments at all on it, how we can make it better, or equally, if you've got more questions around how to use it, please do mention it in the comments below. I do my very best to try to look at all of the comments and respond to them as best I can. And I really love engaging with all of you guys. I am so grateful for your support and really blown away by the gratitude that I've experienced from all of you. So I hope that this gray hair detective can be of service to you. Feel free to share it around if you want, and I look forward to continuing to engage with you. Okay, take care. Bye.